Hi everyone, my name is John and welcome to another episode on BuyerLab, the real estate podcast where we champion true buyer representation. Today, I'll be covering 4 different types of taxes you'll be subject to when you purchase a property in Singapore. First up, we have Buyer's Stamp Duty, BSD. First and foremost, Buyer's Stamp Duty is payable on all property purchases in Singapore and is calculated based on the purchase price or market value of the property, whichever the higher. This means if the purchase price of your property is 1.8 mil, but the property's valuation is 2 mil, Buyer's Stamp Duty will be calculated based on 2 mil, i.e. the valuation, because it's the higher of the two. For residential properties, Buyer's Stamp Duty will be calculated as such. 1% on the first 180k of the property's value, 2% on the next 180k, 3% on the next 640k, 4% on the next 500k, 5% on the next 1.5 million, and 6% on the remaining amount. The only difference in Buyer's Stamp Duty computation for non-residential properties would be that it stops at the 5% tier. So, if we take a $1 million residential property for example, your Buyer's Stamp Duty payable will be calculated as such. If we take a $2 million residential property, your Buyer's Stamp Duty will be calculated as such. And if we take a $4 million residential property, your Buyer's Stamp Duty will be calculated as such. Now, moving on to additional Buyer's Stamp Duty, the bane of every property investor's existence. ABSD is an additional tax on top of Buyer's Stamp Duty that's imposed on certain categories of buyers looking to purchase residential properties in Singapore. The rates vary depending on the residency status and the number of properties owned by the buyer. As of 27 April 2023's latest round of cooling measures, for Singaporean citizens, your first property ABSD is still 0%. However, your second property will be taxed at 20%. As for your third and subsequent properties, ABSD will be 30%. For Singapore permanent residents, your first property purchase will still be taxed at 5%, but your second property purchase will incur an ABSD of 30%. As for your third and subsequent properties, it will be 35%. For foreigners, you guys are taking the biggest hit. All properties will be taxed at a 60% ABSD. If you are, however, a citizen of either USA, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, or Switzerland, you will receive the same ABSD treatment as a Singaporean citizen due to our free trade agreement. For entities looking to purchase residential properties, your ABSD taxable will be 65%. Now, moving on to the third tax in the list, we have Goods and Services Tax, GST. Good news for residential property buyers, GST is not applicable. GST is only applicable on the purchase price of non-residential properties if the seller is GST registered. The current GST rate is 9% as of 2024. Last but not least, the fourth tax on the list is property tax. This is a tax on property ownership and is payable annually. The rates differ between owner-occupied and non-owner-occupied residential properties. Of course, if you don't want to pay it in one lump sum, you can set up a gyro to pay it over the months. Effective 1st Jan 2025, owner-occupied tax rates will be as such. As for non-owner occupied tax rates, i.e. residential units that are not occupied by their rightful owners because they are being rented out for example, the rates will be as such. For those of you that are wondering why non-owner occupied units are taxed at a higher rate, it's because let out or rented residential properties are considered investment assets, and the tax structure ensures that higher value properties are subject to higher tax rates. As for non-residential properties such as commercial, industrial properties and land, they are taxed at 10% of their annual value. Alright, so that about sums it up for the 4 property-related taxes you will be subject to when purchasing a property in Singapore. It's crucial to plan your finances with these taxes in mind, as they can amount to quite a hefty sum, depending on your property portfolio, of course. If you require any assistance on clarification with regards to the buying process of any property in Singapore, feel free to give us a call. Once again, my name is John, and thanks for tuning in to today's episode of BuyerLab, your trusted source for true buyer representation.